so that you could maximize the forces at each step of the way. Caleb.
Well, I wanted to touch on one aspect of this that I think shouldn't be overlooked, but is rather important, which is the personality of Lenin. Because one pet peeve, I must say, that I have, and this kind of annoys me about, in the United States, we have a number of communist parties that are left over from the 1960s or earlier. Marxism in America has been marginal. It's not been a mainstream current. And all of them spend a huge amount of time trying to tell you how normal their leaders are. And it's a little bit weird, but they'll talk about how their leader is really, really into basketball. He just loves to watch basketball games. And they'll talk about how, their leader is just an ordinary guy who can drink beer, and we're just so normal. We're just average people. Look at us. And that whole thing just kind of reeks of unhealth, because, if anyone has to tell you they're normal, they're not, right? But not in a good way, right? But, Vladimir Lenin was not a normal guy in any sense, right? He was exceptional. And that's what made him great, was his ability to be absolutely exceptional. One of the Menshevik leaders, F.I. Dan, described Lenin as a man who talks, writes, thinks, and breathes nothing but revolution 24 hours a day. Lenin was obsessed. The biographies of Lenin, the accounts from his spouse and others, describe him as somebody who would not sleep for days because he would be so upset over the disputes and the disagreements within the party, and that he was constantly trying to build and hold this revolutionary organization together, and that he developed the method of democratic centralism because Russia had many, many great revolutionary leaders, but they had to get all of them in one organization and concentrate their strengths so that they marched as one. And democratic centralism was a process for doing so. And that Lenin was constantly wrangling and struggling with the various revolutionary leaders of Russia, trying to get them in one organization, trying to get them to act in a disciplined manner and actually carry out and achieve the objectives that they had set out to achieve. And if you read Lenin's writings, he's constantly screaming, we need more discipline, we need more unity, because there wasn't discipline and unity. A lot of these people were from the middle class. They were intellectuals, and they very much wanted to have a debating society. They very much wanted to prove that they were the smart ones, that they were the great individuals. And Lenin is saying we have to focus on actually achieving the goal. And that means subordinating our individual ego or whatever to the overall goal of taking power. And the other thing that comes across in many of the fights in the Bolshevik Party is that Lenin is focused on winning, and he's not concerned with the pettiness of personalities. And that people describe him as being almost cold, right? That his critics said, this man is just so cold-hearted. He's not focused on other things. He's not concerned about personal gripes that people might have, or rumors or concerns, he's just cold, and he's focused on the goal. How can we take power? And that comes across. Lenin did not have a normal personality, and thank goodness for that. He never would have been the great revolutionary visionary he was. He never would have been able to achieve what he had if he'd just been somebody who just got caught up in everyday life. He was exceptional. He was obsessed, and that really comes across when you look at his personality. The other thing I wanted to say about Lenin is that, unfortunately, among the anti-imperialist camp, right, obviously, China, Vietnam, People's Korea, these, Marxist-Leninist countries are a big part of the anti-imperialist camp. You have countries like Russia, you have countries like Iran, that are not Marxist-Leninist, not, anti-imperialist in the Marxist-Leninist sense, but are anti-imperialist and striving against imperialism. And they are very critical of Lenin. And one of the things that they often bring up is their criticism of Lenin. It seems that they associate Lenin with the revolutionary intelligentsia and the aesthetic of chaos and instability that has largely been being used by the imperialists now, George Soros and the color revolution apparatus and destabilizing countries. And they they associate Lenin with that, and that the immediate aftermath of the Bolshevik Revolution, those were not good years in Russia's history. We know they were blockaded, they were surrounded, they were invaded by many different countries, and they associate Lenin with this kind of radical middle class current that's been hijacked by the imperialists now to destabilize anti-imperialist countries, that hijacks revolutionary aesthetics and revolutionary phrases to destabilize countries and do the dirty work of the imperialists. And that's kind of the blowback against Lenin that we see is identifying him with that current. Well, I would urge people to look at what really defined Lenin, which was that Lenin took Marxism out of the revolutionary intelligentsia of Europe. He developed the party of new type. He said that nationalism can be progressive, right? And that the struggle for national liberation would define it. And the communists can lead a struggle of an entire nation to be free from imperialism. Lenin built this organization, the Party of a New Type, that was not the kind of liberal, open-minded, free debating society that the revolutionary intellectuals of Europe wanted. Furthermore, Lenin, what did he say? He said that communism is Soviet power plus electrification. Yes, Russia was very chaotic and the Civil War was an awful time, but Lenin didn't want to keep Russia that way. And it was Stalin who very much fulfilled Lenin's vision of electrifying the Soviet Union with the great 5-year plans and mobilizing the country to industrialize and become a great power. And that Stalin was continuing Lenin's vision of electrifying and building a socialist economy that controlled an industrialized society that was raising living standards. So as much as Lenin did come out of the middle class intelligentsia, he really rescued the Marxist movement from that and took the Marxist movement in a much more, Eurasian direction out of the revolutionary middle class of Europe. And Trotskyism very much is a repudiation of Leninism. It's just a section of that revolutionary middle class that could never accept Leninism. That's what Trotskyism is. Trotsky could never accept the idea that we have to be separate from the European Social Democrats. He always wanted to be the more radical faction of the Social Democrats. When Lenin formed the Party of New Type, Trotsky said, oh no, I'm going to form the August Bloc. I'm going to be the more radical Social Democrat. And that was Trotsky's thing. And Lenin says, no, we're a new thing. We're doing something completely different than these people are doing. Trotsky says, no, we can find a way to still be social democrats, just be more radical. Trotsky says the peasants can't be revolutionary. They're a backward class. And Lenin says, no, we're fighting for the national liberation of a country that is underdeveloped. We need to build an alliance with the peasantry. And that Trotskyism is largely that middle-class European intelligentsia, that aesthetic that's been hijacked by the imperialists. But Leninism was a break with that. And Trotskyism was a current that could not break with the middle-class intelligentsia and really held on to the idea that the West will be the center of the global revolution. Trotsky said that New York City is the foundry where the fate of mankind will be forged. Trotsky was just in love with European social democracy, whereas Lenin was saying, no, the revolutionary energy is going to be in the East, among the colonized people fighting for their national liberation.
Totally. And of course, when it comes to the home population, again, underlining your point, Caleb, what did Lenin say? He looked at how rotten the upper layer of the working class had become because of the loot that was coming from the empire. And he said, for our movement to be successful, it must be based in the poor. We must go lower and deeper to the poor masses who are not getting all these kickbacks that make their life lovely and make them feel comfortable. And so they can sit around and consider socialism to be an abstract debating point. It's got to be people who understand that it's a bread and butter question for them and their future.